So welcome all. Today we'll be having a look at how you can go about managing your attributes using Excel and what exactly that process entails. So first off, what we're going to start with is point properties. So point properties are basically the precursor to a lot of the attribute information that we've added, and they were introduced into AutoCAD, Civil 3D, BricsCAD as a way to basically turn points from being a marker purely with coordinate information into a more data-rich object, which houses a variety of different information pieces. So in the example I've got here, you can see that we have things such as elevation, code, some fairly basic ones, but then things such as description, role, and timestamp. All of these are different properties that we can then go and work with as surveyors or even civil engineers. Once you've got this information, there's a variety of different methods to export this out for various uses. A few of them are listed here. Attribute object tables are a new one introduced with V26 of Stringer. Esri shape format is one that's commonly requested by councils, along with a CAD table for easy viewing and CSV TXT files if you're needing to import this into a different job or you're needing to import it into your total station. This is the easiest way to go. Over the course of today, I'll go through a number of these. And if you have any that I don't cover that you'd like to see added to the software, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're always looking for new ways to improve Stringer. So with the talk about properties, we can now talk about how you go about editing these. So the properties are the basis for this. You can then export them out to Excel using Excel Link, which was introduced in Stringer V25. And within here, you can do a variety of edits, which you can then pull back into Stringer and update your point properties with the information. A good example of this is, say you're working for a council and that council already has the pit specifics that they want tied to the points. You've gone out to locate the location of the pits. You could then pull that information across and very quickly update all of the information in the drawing without having to sit there out in the field punching in all of the information manually. It can all be done through this automated process. So we've recognized the power of these spreadsheets, allow you to export out both the point geometry and the property data across, link everything together, and then you can make these edits in real time. And we'll be going through a live example of this. Just quickly, a quick showing of what exactly it does. You can see here I've started with one point group. So we assign a point group to be exported. We pull the properties from there that we're wishing to export and work with. You can also do this on an import measure. But we've got all the information here. We've exported it out. We do the edit in Excel, and then we bring it back in, update all of our point information, easily seen through the point groups with the relevant info. So let's get into a live demonstration of this, and then I'll come back to the PowerPoint to talk a bit more about how you can get attributes and property information onto points. So you can see here I've got a job that many of you are probably familiar with. This is the Jones Oval job, and we've actually gone ahead and created some properties on these points already. Now, properties can be created on points using a variety of different methods. You're more than welcome to watch our prior webcasts where we go over things such as point formats, which allow you to set up property lists and such. But in this case here, I've already gone ahead. We've already got a bunch of properties added in for these trees. You can see here I have species and protected, and I'm wanting to work with these. So the council has provided me some further information on what exactly these species are and whether or not they're protected. I'm wanting to add that information on. I could select each of these points individually using the edit point command. I could go ahead, select this one here, and I can manually edit these as needed. Very time consuming, but it would get the job done. What I can do instead though, is I can go to this command here, import from Excel. Opening this, you're going to be asked to create a workbook. So I'm going to go plus here. We'll call this one tree export. Let's copy that, paste it into the description. I'm going to create a new Excel document. So I'm going to open this and we'll just call it trees. Go OK, and that document is now ready to work with. Now, I've got two sheets here. I'm wanting to work with sheet one, as this is the sheet within the Excel document that I'm wanting to pull this information from. So if you're familiar with Excel, Excel can have multiple sheets. You can set this up to work with multiple at the same time. So sheet one's the one I'm wanting to use. You've then got the controls down here. You can edit any of these ones listed here. But in this case, we're working with the properties. So I'm going to double click property control, and that opens up this interface here. So let's go ahead and provide it a name. So we just call this one codes, as that's the property I'm going to be working with. Description, same thing. These can be whatever you're wanting to list them as. They just need to be something unique that you're going to remember. The workbook we're working in is trees, so that's correct. Sheet is going to be sheet one. Point group, so this links into your Stringer point groups here. So I'm selecting trees as that's what I'm wanting to work with. I could select a different one if the properties live within there and I'm wanting to work with them. Dropping down property, you can see a list of those properties that we had listed within point groups. So in this case, I'm going to be working with code. And then you have point number location and point property location. This is due to us exporting this information to Excel and then re-importing it. We need to know which columns in Excel that we need to work with. So the point number, we're going to have that in the A column starting at A1. And the point property, in this case codes, is going to be listed as B1. So that's correct. And then I want to go set up Excel export. So it also exports this information to Excel as I work with it. I'm going to go OK. It's going to say, OK, select an export process. In this case, I already have trees pre-set up, but all I'm doing here is just saving it as an export file, basically. The codes aren't the only thing I'm wanting to work with. I also have the type of tree, the species. So let's also export that one. So I'm going to select property control again. I'm going to enter species. Copy that and place it here again. Point group, we're working with trees still, so that's correct. Property, this time we're working with the species property, so I'm going to select that one. And then this time we're going to change the starting cell of the property location to C, because we're working in the third column across. We don't want to override the point code information. We want a separate one to work with here. The point number is going to be the exact same, so we don't really care if that's changed or not. I'm going to go set up Excel export, as we still want to export this information from the point group. So we're going to go OK. Again, assigning it to an export process, and we're good to export this out. Once all this is ready, we're going to go run Excel link. That's going to push this out as an Excel document. You can see it's now finished here. And if I just navigate to that location, you can see here we have a trees file that's just been created, ready for us to work with. So I'm going to open that up. So it's just opened up twice. Yep, that's correct. I've got this one here. So this file here holds the point numbers that we've exported, the codes that we've exported, and the information on the trees, so the species. But then, as I said, I've also been provided a document with new information. This is the information that actually needs to be applied here. So the best way to work with this is simple. I'm just going to use Excel, copy this information here, and then override it in the original document, because we've linked this trees Excel file to Stringer. So I'm just going to save this now and then close it. I've edited that information. This other file can now be removed. I'm not really fussed about that anymore. And then I'm just going to go run Excel link to update that information. Once that's done, I can go, see, I do need to quickly update the point. So we're just going to go in here and select this update all button. This is just going to update everything in case you've also done things such as your line work and such. I'm then going to go into point groups, trees, and we can see it's now changed from all being cedar trees to being cedar, pine, maple, all different values. The codes have also been updated. You can see we now have some 200 codes in here and some 204s, as opposed to just the 201 codes that we had earlier. So this is a way you could very quickly update any of the properties within here and get them ready for exporting, whether you're going to export them as a series of Esri shape files, export it as a KML file, which will be exported out to Google Earth, or export out a CAD table, which will hold all the property information that you just listed. So we move this out of the way. You can see we have species listed here, and the codes have been updated as shown. So that's a quick run through of how you would go about doing basically your property exports. But something that's been becoming a bit more popular these days is working with attributes. So attributes are something that they're basically the next step beyond point properties. So you go attributes, and then you could work with those, bring them down, or not down, bring them across to point properties within the CAD environment and working with them that way. And their primary way of getting them is to work with the Leica XML file format or the Trimble JXL file format. Both of those are very relevant to the attribute journey. And you'll see today we're going to work with an XML file format and how we can use that to populate things. So what's the kind of workflow we expect for this? Well, first off, you'd be importing the JXL XML file. Using this, you create points, which also applies the attribute point properties from the XML JXL file itself. You'd export out all that information to a point property, which can then be exported out to Excel, and then sync that information back onto the point, which will update the attribute information in the file. Sounds a bit complicated. It's not. You'll see as we go through it today, it's a very quick journey, very powerful journey to learn how to use. So when you're importing attribute data, as I stated, you're working primarily with the JXL XML format. This is the easiest way to work with it. I will say, though, that you can actually set this up to apply attribute data directly to already imported points. So if you are using a raw data format, you can have the points created and then have a dedicated JXL XML file format. You can find information about that online and apply that information directly to the points. You can also create a project. A project holds attribute schemas. Attribute schemas are information that is basically, it's all your attribute information directly tied to it. We'll talk about that a bit more in a second, but it's, say you picked up a kit, it's all, the attribute on there would be the owner, it would be the depth, it would be the type, material, all that information. It ties all that information onto your points and allows you to sync all that attribute data to existing points if you've imported without an XML or JXL file. So as said, we'll talk about schemas now. The schemas allow you to hold the attribute tables, as I was saying. You can save these as dedicated locations. So if you set up one attribute file once, you don't have to set it up again. You can simply save it and then reopen it ready for use later on. You can set up things such as field validator. So if you've picked up something like tree species, you can tell it that you need to look for particular species. And if it doesn't match anything, you can actually have it highlighted. We did a webinar on these that goes into more detail on this, I believe, November last year, and that can be found on our YouTube channel if you're curious. So let's actually get into a live demonstration of this. So we're going to be importing a XML file and working with it. So I'll just switch off this drawing here. We'll open up a brand new one. This drawing has had nothing done to it. This is a base drawing. I'm just skipping the saving process. So to import the data, we're going to drop down attribute data. We're going to go import a Leica XML. Not really fussed about that particular thing, so we're going to just skip past that. Select XML file, so we're just going to browse for that. So for anyone who has installed the latest Stringer, you will also have a copy of Leica XML import file if you want to have a practice of this yourself. I'm going to double click that. We don't have any survey strings to this file, so we're able to leave that as is. But we do want to set up a database because this file has attribute information on it that we want to apply. So opening this, we're going to drop this down and select XML JXL schema. This just allows us to work with a blank schema that doesn't have any information attached to it. So if I open up the schema editor, open schema and select that one, you can see there is nothing in here at the moment. So it's not going to conflict with anything that we create. So we'll go OK here and then import points. And this imports all the data along with all the attribute information attached to it. So you can see all the points have been brought in. If I drop this down again and go to the table viewer, which allows us to see all different information, I'll select unlog. And you can see here we have point number, code, name, and object ID are blank, but code, description, role, and timestamp are all filled in, ready for us to basically work with. Now, you could go through it at this stage and manually start editing some of these. So I could enter a name of, I don't know, Mark 2, something in there. I can edit the code here, unlog T or something. I'll keep that as is. We don't override any codes for what we're going to work with. But you can come through and do edits in here if you want. I find a much easier way to do this is actually to export it out into Excel and then work with it in there. For anyone curious about how those tables were created, again, we pulled them from the Excel document. Dropping this down, we can go into the schema editor, and you can actually see that this is now populated with all these different ones. It's the same file we had a second ago, just populated. You could then go and save this as needed. But enough of that. If you want more information on that, please watch our previous webinar. But we've got the attribute information tied to the points. Not tied to the points, tied to the project. We now need to tie them directly onto the points. To do so, we've got this command here, sync to Kogo properties, which syncs all the attribute information in the drawing, in the project, to the points themselves as point properties. So I'm going to select that. It's going to run through and sync everything. And now if we go into point groups, we can go and basically create an unlog point group, because that's one that's got a lot of information. Just going to include that code. So for anyone unfamiliar with point groups, this is one of the really cool things it could do. So I've got a list of all of those properties here, but we haven't got this set up at the moment to look for the particular information within the attribute list. Those are custom properties. So if I toggle property list now, set up property list, I can go ahead and make a custom one. So let's say I want to add in role. I can update that, update this, and you can see that that's now been added as an additional property. To export the information out to Excel, we need them all to be listed here. So I'm just going to go back in the property list. This can be saved after it's been done. So I'm just going to load one in. I should have it, oops, here. So you see I've got an unload PPL. So this is a point property list. Select that. You can see description, role, and timestamp are already pre-set up, ready to go. Going to go apply, and you can see they're now added into this list. Now we can go about exporting this out to Excel for further editing. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to select the export to Excel that we were using earlier. Select the plus here. We'll call this one unlog export. Let's copy that down to make it a bit easier. Select this option to create a new Excel document. So unlog export, same as before. Select OK. I've now got it ready to go. Sheet 1 has been pre-selected as it's going to be the first sheet. And now I want to export out those properties. So select property control. We can choose a point group that we're wanting to export. The properties tied to that point group. So let's export out. Let me just check here. We're going to export out our description. Actually, now let's do our role. Vertical A1, B1, set up Excel export. So we'll go OK to that. So you can see here it's asking me for an export process. So we'll call this one unlog. Go OK. And that's now added as something that we can export. You can do this for any of the properties within here. So unlog, I can do it for code as well. All of this can be exported. Actually, let's not do code because that will throw it out. Let's do description. Change this to be C1, set up Excel export, go OK. And that's now added in, and it's going to be exported out as C1. You can add as many of these as you want, but I'll stick with 2 for now. You can then go run Excel link to export this out as a CSV file or an Excel file. And then if we reopen our document here, you can see we have unlug export ready to go. And we'll also open up this official, quotation marks, unlug pit information document with some additional info here that we're wanting to add. So if we open these up at the same time, we can see here that we have our point numbers, we have our role, and then we have our description. So we're going to select this B1 here, and we're going to update our description. And then we're going to select the list here, and we're going to update our role. So that information is now going to be overridden onto our points. So we'll close this, run Excel link. That's now sync the information. We'll update all of the data in the drawing. Go back to point groups, have a look at unlug, and we can see the description has now changed. Oops. The description has now changed, and the role has now changed, updating based on that information within Excel. From here, we want to tie this back to the attributes, so the point attributes, because if we go and check that information now, we can actually see that it's remained the previous sets of information. So closing this, we're going to go back here and go create object tables. This is going to, if you haven't done it before, create the object tables. In this case, it's going to sync the object tables. That's going to go through and do that. And then once it's done with that, we're going to be able to open up the table viewer again and check and see all the information. So opening this up, go back to unlug. We can see that the description and the role has now changed, ready for us to work with as we want. So we could push it out using the export to GIS command here. This will export it out to a location of your choosing. In this case, it'd be in the same folder I had earlier. So let's actually just make it a bit cleaner. Let's just call it export. So we can export that out here. The shape files were created. And if we have a look in that folder, we can see all of those have now been exported out, ready for us to import into a number of different formats. If you are looking for a free way of bringing shape files, QGIS is a good method to do it. Or if you're working in a different CAD environment, you can use Civil 3D to also import it. Further to what I was talking about earlier, you can also do the same within point groups. You can export out to the Esri shapefile format using this here. You can also export out a KML file if your drawing has been coordinated, allowing you to open it up using Google Earth or a similar feature. Or again, you can push out the CAD table, setting up or even set up a property list as we did before, and exporting that out as a CSV or text file. So yeah, it's a really powerful tool to be able to use, being able to work with Excel Link in the way it is. Everyone I know of that's used it within our client base has actually had a really successful time with it. I'd really like more people to pick it up and work with it because I find it to be a really cool function. But with that, that's really all I wanted to show today. So thanks all for attending.